Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, I'm Eternus 6 and I make educational content about Deadlock, and today I'm going to be giving you some information and some tips to help you improve your aim in-game. This video is going to be split into 3 parts, so first I'm going to talk about sensitivity and settings, then I'll be giving you some tips for when you're in-game, and after that I'll briefly talk about aim training as well. I do want to make a quick disclaimer, which is that you really don't need crazy good aim to get a high rank in this game. Unless you want to reach high Eternus only playing M1 carries like Haze, Wraith, Infernus, Mirage or something like that, you can get there with just solid aim. My aim also isn't amazing, it just gets the job done. And the goal of this video is to help you get to that point where you don't feel like you're being held back by your lack of mouse control. Alright, so first off, we're gonna make sure you're not shooting yourself in the foot and making it way harder than it needs to be. So let's talk about sensitivity. Your in-game sensitivity depends on 2 things. The sensitivity slider in Deadlock and your mouse DPI. If you're unsure what DPI you're using, look up your mouse on the internet, look up the manufacturing details. Most modern mice also come with software. If yours does, install that software if you haven't already, open it up and find your DPI setting in there. The most common DPIs that pro players use are 400, 800 and 1600. Technically, using a DPI of 1600 or even higher is better, but that's kind of nerdy, and using 800 or 1600 is totally fine. Whichever one of those you use, realistically doesn't really matter at all. So DPI affects your in-game sensitivity when you're looking around in the game, but it also affects your cursor sensitivity when you're using Windows or when you're using the in-game shop or a menu in-game. So if it's uncomfortable right now, either too high or too low, go to your Windows mouse settings and set your mouse pointer speed to whatever you like. Also, while you've got your mouse software open, if possible, find your polling rate setting and set it to as high as possible. Usually that'll be 500 or 1k Hz, and this will essentially just make your mouse more responsive. If your mouse has an even higher option, you can set it to 2k, 4k or even 8k Hz, but at that point you likely won't really notice a difference at all, and it could even cause lag in games, so up to you. Next up, Google mouse sensitivity converter and go to a website like this one, link in the description. Select convert from Deadlock. Convert to doesn't matter, but let's just also select Deadlock. Click show advanced here, and then input your Deadlock sensitivity and your mouse DPI. So my sensitivity is 0.32 and my DPI is 1600. And then look at this number here that says centimeters per 360. And that is a universal measurement of sensitivity in games because it translates between any game you play. And it is the distance that it'll take you to physically move your mouse to do a 360 in game. Now there's no magic number that will make you an aim god, but pros and shooter games usually use a sensitivity that falls somewhere between 20 and 50 or 60 centimeters per 360. Of course, there's always outliers, people that play with, 15 centimeters per 360 and have insane aim anyways. But it is generally recommended to keep your sensitivity somewhat within this range, because it is the sweet spot where you can get both speed and precision. And you'll have to use your arm, your wrist and your fingers to aim. And if you're currently using a higher sensitivity than this, so that would be a lower centimeters per 360 value, right? It'll probably take some time to get used to using your arm as well for aiming, and you might also want to buy a larger mousepad. But in the long run, it'll likely improve your aim, and you're also going to be less likely to get some kind of wrist injury. Now within that range, like I said, there's no magic number. It depends on your preference and your needs. For example, if you tend to play short-range shotgun heroes or just movement heroes that constantly dash around enemies, you'll probably value speed over long-range accuracy, and you might use a higher sensitivity, so a lower centimeters per 360 value. While if you play longer range heroes and need to be accurate at those longer ranges, you might benefit from a lower sensitivity, so a higher centimeters per 360 value. But again, it depends on your personal preference. You could also use a different sensitivity for different heroes that you play. Also, a common myth is that you should find one perfect sensitivity and stick to it forever and use the exact same centimeters per 360 in every game you play and whatnot because of muscle memory. That is not true. Aim is all about mouse control and hand-eye coordination. Anyone with solid mouse control can change their sensitivity within a reasonable range and get used to it in like less than 30 minutes. In fact, some people even argue that changing your sensitivity could actually improve your mouse control because you're forcing your brain to adapt. But I will say that if you're struggling with your aim, constantly changing your sensitivity, especially when you're already in game and playing, is generally not going to be the solution, because you're not addressing the underlying issue, which is a lack of mouse control. Next up, let's go over the in-game settings. So there's 2 things I want to talk about. Your graphic settings and your crosshair. Your crosshair is of course just preference, use whatever you like, but I would recommend using something small, static and with high contrast colors. Here's also a website that has some Deadlock preset crosshairs, so that's very nice, link in the description. And there's also a lot of people, myself included, that use another Steam app called Crosshair X, which allows you to customize your crosshair completely and overlay it on all your games. Then graphic settings, you ideally want to set these to low, because that will decrease the visual clutter on your screen, as well as improve your game's performance, increasing your FPS and decreasing your mouse input lag, which of course makes your mouse more responsive in-game. Alright, so now that you have your settings and sensitivity set up, let's move on to the in-game tips. So the first tip is to do a short warm-up before you queue up, or during the queue. You can just sit in firing range, shoot some orbs, track the bots, dash and slide around and try to keep your crosshair on the dummy's head, or you can even grab a friend and do some duels. Alternatively, you can also do a warm-up in an aim trainer, which is what I like to do, and I'll talk about that later into the video. Next up is to also use your movement to aim, not just your mouse. Sometimes you can use your strafes to get your crosshair on target, and it can help you prevent overflicking, especially at longer ranges. And sometimes limiting your movement or even standing still can be a great way to increase your accuracy. If you're trying to hit or track a target and you're not really at risk of taking a lot of damage by limiting your movement or standing still, do it. Because unless you're moving to avoid damage or to reposition, there's no point in making it harder for yourself to hit the enemy. Sliding around when no one's trying to hit you is just gonna make it harder for no reason. Next one really comes with experience, and it may sound obvious, but be aware of your enemy's movement capabilities. Of course, everyone in this game can dash, jump, wall jump, and all of those lock you in a certain animation or trajectory. And there's also heroes that have certain movement abilities that specifically lock them in animations as well. For example, Shift, Slice and Dice is a fixed distance, so you can anticipate him using it and quickly adjust. The distance is always going to be the same. Similarly, Mirage's Tornado and Calico's Leaping Slash also have fixed distances. Another example is Vindicta's Flight. When she first presses it, she shoots up into the sky, which is really hard to track, and it might not be worth to waste bullets on that. But when she's already in the air, her movement is pretty limited and slow, so it can be pretty easy to track her. Also, it may sound stupid, but what comes up must come down. So when jumping or wall jumping, people enter a predictable set trajectory that you can track. And the same goes for example, Lash using his grapple or Holiday using her bounce pad. They can dash around in the air, but when falling down, they'll be moving in a predictable manner. And the next step is about reading your enemies. People are often pretty predictable with what they want to do. So for example, people tend to run to cover. And knowing that can make it really easy to track people because they're just moving in a straight line towards that cover. And I've got one small bonus tip that kind of relates to this, and that tip is to look at your enemy, not your crosshair. You're trying to hit the enemy by putting them in the center of your screen, and you're trying to read their movement. So you want to have your eyes focused on them, not your crosshair. However, I do know that some people like to switch to looking at their crosshair instead at longer ranges, so feel free to try that out as well, see if it helps you. Alright, so those were my tips for in-game. Let's move on to the last part of this video, which is about aim training. Aim training is a great way to quickly improve your mouse control. It kind of has diminishing returns, so if you're new to shooters or your aim is just not that good yet, you'll get a ton of value from your first like 50 to 100 hours of aim training. But once you're already at a decent level, you'll probably get less value per hour spent, and it could just be better to play the game instead. Unless you really want to take your aim to the next level. So if you want to get started with aim training, there's two well-known Steam apps you could try. First one is Aim Labs, which is free, has a built-in ranked system, and quite a bit of content from what I've seen, and quite a bit of fluff. And it's a bit more gamified compared to the other one, which is Kovacs. Kovacs is like $8 on Steam, and it does not have a built-in rank system, and it is a bit more toned down, less flashy. And I personally prefer Kovacs because it's a bit more easily customizable and it feels more responsive to me, but either one works really. All you really have to do to get value from aim training is to find a good routine, put on some music if you want, and run that routine as often as you want and as your schedule allows for. Even if you only do it for a few hours per week or like 15 minutes every second day, you'll likely see improvement. Of course, if you're just going to run the same easy scenario every day, you're not going to really improve. So I personally would recommend using the Voltaic benchmarks and routines. They have playlists for both Aim Labs and Kovacs that'll give you a rank and a good idea of how well you're doing in different categories of aiming. And they also have weakness-oriented playlists that can help you improve, for example, your tracking if you're bad at that. So I'll link the Voltaic Discord and website down below if you're interested. Of course, you don't have to aim train to get good aim, but it personally helped me a lot when I started playing shooters, and I definitely noticed improvement, so that's why I would recommend it to people that want to improve their aim. Alright, so that was the video. I wish you good luck on your aim improvement journey. Of course, if anything is unclear or you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll try to answer. Also, of course, if you have any other tips to share, do leave a comment as well. And if you enjoyed the video and learned something, please consider liking, subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Love you. Bye bye.